So there's this weird thing that keeps happening at least for the last 4 years, and I just find it kind of fascinating. So what it is that I'll go out and, well, it's happened a couple times, 3 times. Well, I'll go out to anoint somebody, and you're talking with them, and like the first person I was talking to was talking about their life, and they were in, at one time, a very abusive marriage. And the woman said, well, thank God I met Nadine and Leonard Aschenbrenner. And oddly enough, they offered kind of her a better way. And then another example, I was anointing this woman, and this woman says, well, I'm sure you've heard about my life. Well, I don't know everything about everybody's life. I know everything about yours, but I don't. So I said, well, no, I don't know about your life. And holy cow, the first half of her life until she was 18 was, frankly, just god-awful. Unloved, rejected, abused, and angry at the world. And she, once again, this other woman says, well, thank God I met Nadine Aschenbrenner. Once again, Leonard and Nadine Aschenbrenner. And she says, they straightened out my life. They straightened out her life, and she actually ends up having a great life, has a great marriage, a lot of love. But my point being is that it's happened 3 times in 4 years, and I'm just wondering, I don't think Leonard and Nadine Aschenbrenner know about this, but just in their marriage, Leonard and Nadine, they're just farmers. So I want to tell you their story because I think it's kind of interesting. So Nadine Aschenbrenner, when I first moved here, met her at the coffee and donut hour, and we were talking because she was a nurse in her life, and she actually used to smoke. So I said, well, what is a nurse doing smoking? I said, why would you take up smoking? And Nadine says, because when I was in nursing school, the nuns said, if you get caught smoking, you will be immediately kicked out. So Nadine says, so I took up smoking. And this sounds kind of strange, but, she's a very sweet woman, but clearly there's something rebellious about her. There really always is. She's a little untamed. And then she meets Leonard, and Leonard, she was her world. She was his world. He fell deeply in love with her. So the odd part is, I just think it's kind of amazing that they're just farmers, but because they have a great marriage and faith, in this odd way, their marriage and love for each other kind of straightens out a lot of other people's life. And Leonard died a few years ago, but I kind of imagine Leonard, who's salt of the earth, when he meets Christ saying, thank you for all the justice you brought out in the world. Because if I ran across 3, there's a lot more. And I'm sure Leonard would be like, well, what justice? I was a farmer. I think if you can really offer the world hospitality, you bring about justice. Or, this sounds kind of strange, thank God Nadine Aschenbrenner is a little rebellious, because why shouldn't she teach these women who were abused or rejected, horrible marriage, you can choose better. You don't have to settle for that. You can have something greater. Without kind of her gift of being, untamed, maybe she couldn't have offered that gift to these other women. And the only point being is this, is that I would say Leonard and Nadine offered a type of hospitality that brought justice to a lot of people's lives. And they don't even know it. Because the theme in the readings is actually hospitality and justice. Now, in the Gospel of Luke, Luke's favorite word is hospitality. He uses it over and over again. And I know I've mentioned this 1,000 times, but the Gospel of Luke, it's kind of fun because the Gospel of Luke is nothing more than 10 meals with Jesus. And each meal has a theme. So my joke, because I've been to Italy 3 times, and all the Italians are great at food and hospitality. Nobody does food and drink better than the Italians. And Jesus in the Gospel of Luke loves a meal and wine. And so my joke is, clearly Jesus is Italian. And at this meal, the Gospel of Luke is so easy. At this meal, the theme is hospitality and justice. That if you eat at the table of Christ, you are obligated to justice. That's why, like, the responsorial psalm is, those who do justice will live in the presence of the Lord. It's about justice. Except the Gospel of Luke is always very shocking. The Gospel of Luke really always upsets people. And the part that's upsetting is, so it's always shocking. But the shocking part of today's story is, you have to remember, at the time of Christ, women weren't allowed to learn the Torah. They weren't allowed an education. In fact, there's this phrase, better to burn the Torah, the Bible, better to burn the Torah than let a woman read it. That they weren't allowed an education. The shocking part is, there you have Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus, learning Torah. That's what she's doing. She's not praying. Because some people, and this drives me up the wall, will say, well, this gospel is about prayer versus works. It's not. Anybody who says that is trying to take the real teeth out of the gospel. It's shocking. Christians at the time of Christ, if they would have heard this story, would have been shocked that Christ was allowing women to get an education. That's the justice part that's real shocking. And in the story, you have Martha. And Martha is upset because Martha is in the kitchen doing all the work. And I love where she goes to Jesus and says, Jesus, aren't you upset that Mary isn't in the kitchen with me working? And Jesus says, no, I'm not. Mary has chosen the better part, and she will not be denied. FYI, anytime anybody in the Gospel of Luke tells Jesus what he should be doing, you should tell Mary to get, Jesus always says no. And so Martha is upset that she's doing all the work, but it's not just work. Don't think it's kitchen work. The Greek word that's used is diakonia, like our deacon. Diakonia is church work. So the idea is that Martha is doing all this church work, and Mary is learning the Torah. And Martha is not, the point of the story is not that, you should learn the Bible rather than do church work. It's not what she's doing, it's why she's doing it. Martha is doing it so that she's in control. All her church work is so that she's in power. If you notice in the story, it's Martha's house. It's a Martha who has a sister named Mary, not a Mary has a sister named Martha. It's Marcia. So it's not that she's doing church work. It's she's doing it not for hospitality, but so that she has a little bit of power over other people. And there's this invisible line. Women were supposed to stay in the kitchen. Mary has broken that line and is getting an education. And Jesus is fine with it. It's really about justice. So this meal, if you're going to put it into practice, is about that if you share in the Eucharist, then you're obligated to bring justice in your life. And the other part that I find just ironic is, have you ever thought that you're offering God the wrong type of hospitality? Because it says Martha is busy with the details of hospitality. She's doing all this work, but it really doesn't welcome Jesus. She's not really welcoming Jesus. She's telling Jesus what to do. It's Mary who's actually offering the right type of hospitality. And that is, in this case, justice. So it just kind of amazed me that, could you imagine after a lifetime of practicing religion, You die and you meet Christ, and Christ says, oh, you never did that for me. You did that for yourself. You did it so you had power over other people. The same way, I think, Leonard died. The same way when Leonard, I think, meets Christ, Christ is going to say, thank you for all the justice. Thank you for the hospitality that you offered to these people that were broken. They just did it as a married couple. Their marriage and their life brought about a little bit of justice in the world. You get the same theme with the first reading, which is one of my favorites. I love it because it's a story of Abraham and Sarah and the three angels, and it's a story about how monotheism began. Religion began with this crazy elderly couple, and they are crazy because Abraham is sitting at the door of his tent in the heat of the day, and it's a desert. Three strangers are walking by. And if it's the heat of the day, that means they could die. So Abraham, who's the head of his clan, runs out and says to the three strangers, come inside. Let me wash your feet. That theme's going to come up at the Last Supper, Jesus washing. He takes three strangers and says, let me wash your feet. Let me give you a little something to eat and drink, a little noshing. And he takes them in, washes their feet, and he cooks a meal for them. He cooks an entire steer for them. His wife is just as crazy. She bakes 3 measures of bread, which is 50 pounds of bread, for a whole steer and 50 pounds of bread for 3 strangers. And the point being is that with that time period, you owe no obligation to anybody outside your clan. They're not part of your clan, your family. You don't have to take care of them. But Abraham and Sarah, they offer hospitality. Well, it turns out that the 3 are angels. And the angels say, oh, because you offered us hospitality, you will be granted greater life. And this is always a theme in the Bible. You offer hospitality to other people, then God will give you the greater life. You refuse hospitality to people outside your little circle, God will diminish your life. And so that's how monotheism began. That's how religion began. I love it. And they do get greater life. Sarah, who's 75 years old, becomes pregnant. What 75-year-old wouldn't want to have a baby? A joke. But they are granted greater life. And the point being for us, as we gather around the table of Christ, we continue this theme of meal and hospitality. That if you share the table of Christ, then you are obligated to a life that brings hospitality to other people. You show people the same way Nadine showed these women. You can choose something better. You can choose a better life. That's a hospitality we offer. So at the end of our life, hopefully Christ will thank us for the justice and hospitality we offered others. And so together, let us stand and profess our faith.